Here's another show you can enjoy in the True Story FM family of entertainment podcasts.
Ever wonder where the devil got his horns?
How about those cloven hooves?
Or that pitchfork?
Wasn't he an angel?
No, he was a snake.
No, he's the great red dragon.
No, he's the beast.
He's the prince of this world.
Prince of darkness.
Well, he's the prince of dark.
Good morning, Star Lovelies. One of my names is Lester Ryan Clark.
And I sometimes go by Keenan Diaz.
And we're the hosts of the brand new podcast, The Devil's Details. What comes to mind when I say Lucifer?
How about Satan?
What about just the devil? How did the big bad of the Western world end up with so many faces? Join us as we dig up, decipher, and deconstruct the devil's many forms throughout history.
Take a guided tour with Dante through the 9 circles of hell.
Or revisit Satan's angsty bad boy years in Paradise Lost.
Learn the ins and outs of a Faustian contract.
Easier than a 1099, but with a hell of a lot more fine print.
Slither on over to The Devil's Details on True Story FM and join us in the diabolic discussion.
Love and hisses. Mwah! Didn't Al Pacino play him in a movie?
Are you sure that wasn't Robert De
I could
Niro?
have sworn it was Tim Curry.
That was Elizabeth
Didn't
Hurley.
he go down to Georgia at some point?
Hello and welcome to this episode of the Star Wars Generations podcast. Friends, I am in a hotel in Pennsylvania. Erin has just returned from Las Vegas. Alex is missing and presumed a good fan. But anyway, we're still going to come here and give you a quick response to episode 8 of Star Wars The Acolyte that has just come out. We'll be doing a number of deeper dives. There's a lot to talk about with this episode and this whole series. But just, Erin, overall, what'd you think?
I really enjoyed it. I think a lot of it went how I thought it was going to go, but there was enough that didn't go the way I thought it would go that made me still enjoy it a lot.
Yeah.
Also, the first time I watched it, didn't notice. Second time, I was like, whose fucking Skellahand is that? And then I was like, holy shit, is that Darth Plagueis? So that was crazy. I don't know how I missed that first time around, but it was like 8 a.m. I was on a plane. So that was a really fun discovery for me second time around, was just that little cameo and then the cameo at the end of the episode. But I feel like it did a good job of tying off a lot of the stories in a way that is like okay at the end of a season 1.
Yeah.
I don't know if we were expecting a season 2, but I think they've left it very much that they could and probably should do a season 2. But you never really know. How about you? What'd you think?
Yeah, I think I felt the same. I think overall, and we'll talk more about the overall show, but I think this really, like you said, it tied up a lot of the loose ends in ways that I was really surprised they were able to do, especially all the questions of like, why don't the Jedi know more about what happened? I thought the way it wrapped up was really perfect, and I have a lot to say about that. I think overall I wound up thinking that like this is a very good show that just didn't execute on some parts of it, but that I think overall I'm left feeling like I really get a picture of where the Jedi were at this point in time and what was good about them, what the problems were, and how the Sith work. And it's interesting because I feel like a lot of people want a season 2. I'm not sure I do, because I feel like this story was so... There are middle parts of it, like I said, that I think weren't well executed, but it had a clear beginning, middle, and end. It had like a lot to take away from it. I think that I hope that I would like to get a story that takes place between now and Andor, or some of the other shows that are happening then, or I guess in the early sequels and stuff like that. And I'm sorry, I'd like to have a show that happens, between this time and Phantom Menace, or a book or something like that. And I'd like it if some of these characters show up. It would be fun to see more of what the Sith are up to during this time, although I kind of don't want that. I kind of want it to mostly remain mystery.
Yeah.
I'd love to know more about like what happens with Yoda and the conversation that him and Vanessa are going to have. And like references to this happening. But I don't think I want a sequel. I think I want something new. I mean, I agree with you that the hand that we saw could very well be Darth Plagueis. It could be the person who comes before them, who might be called Darth Tenebrous, but that's only from an extended universe novel that we've talked about. Great, but we don't know if that's canon. Honestly, I kind of like the idea that we don't know what Darth name May is going to take. Maybe she grows up to be Darth Plagueis. Like, we don't know.
Oh, Osha?
Osha, yeah, sorry.
They did this twin switch.
Yep, they did. So yeah, I just love that there's so many possibilities there, but I feel like I got a complete story that made sense and it tied everything up well. Can you give us just a quick episode summary for those who either haven't seen it or are listening a while later, or however you want to phrase it?
Yes, I'm just going to peek over my notes so I have like bullet points. So it starts off, the last episode ended with Osha putting on Chimera's kind of sensory deprivation helmet. This episode starts with she has it on, and then she's like screaming. And then the stranger or Chimera is like, oh shit. And he's trying to help her get it off. And he kind of does the black eyes like the witches did. Anyways, she says she has a vision that May killed Soul with no weapon. He's like, that's crazy. And so then they decide to the two of them go and try to meet up with May and Soul. And Osha's like, well, I know where they are because I had the vision. So they go. And then May and Soul are on the ship. May escapes Soul, hops in a escape pod, says, see you in hell, Jedi, and jets out of there on a ship. And then Soul hunts her ass down. And then Basil foils him. And then they all end up on Brendock together. And Soul is looking for May. Then he finds the stranger. And then Osha and May find each other. They have a reunion, a little conversation. And then Osha just like goes batshit crazy on May, like screaming and stuff. And it's like, whoa. And then at some point they stop fighting. Oh, then they get distracted. Whatever. We get our four main characters there together, you know? May gets Soul to admit that he killed their mother in front of Osha. Osha's whole world is destroyed. She ends up choking Soul.
Force choking, yep.
Force choking the life out of Soul. We see everything leave his eyes. And then from there, let's see, Chimera's like, you guys should join me or something like that. And they're like, no, screw you. And the two of them just kind of run away together to figure things out. Chaos ensues. Vernestra shows up with a bunch of random red shirt Jedis who actually turn out to not be red shirts because they don't get killed, but I thought they were gonna. And then, yeah, the episode kind of wraps up with the Jedi find Soul's dead body. They don't find the stranger. They find May, but her memory's been wiped by the stranger, and then Osha is gone.
Right.
So now Vernestra goes to the High Council and tells them that Jedi Master Soul carried all this guilt and was a good man who made a bad decision, and he's the one who killed all these people. And that's why nobody in the High Council or anything like that knows about the Sith. I skipped over something with a senator and honestly some good political machinations we can get into, but that's kind of a summary.
I think that's a good summary of it. Let's talk about one of the most interesting moments, and maybe you understood what happened here and I just missed it. Saul is chasing down May, and he's using some kind of targeting computer that looks a lot like the ones that kind of were used in Star Wars, the original movie A New Hope. And so it looks like, at first, I think we're supposed to think, like, he's going to shoot May down, destroy her ship, and kill her.
Yeah.
But he's also, like, he needs to get very, very close to her to do it. And Basil, as you said, winds up, like, ripping out the wires and stopping him from doing this. Do you think was he trying to actually shoot her, or was that a tractor beam?
That's a good question. It's hard to say. Because, like, when I saw it initially, like, yeah, I think he's just trying to shoot her. Like, he's pissed that she got away. He's like, fuck, I can't let this get out. You know, like, kind of same mindset he's been on this entire time.
Yep.
Of, like, well, now she's become a loose end. Like, to me, it made sense that as his unraveling continues, as the story and the truth comes out to the light, it made sense to me that he could get so, like, aggressive. But you're right. He was, like, right on her. Like, there was no need for a targeting computer. You could have, like, just done a general array. You would hit her. So that is very interesting. I didn't think about that. But the idea of, like, a tractor beam or, like, a pulley cable is probably more accurate or would make more sense at that, like, distance.
Yeah, I would say I think this is kind of my overall problem with the show. Like, I think it's very good. It's probably in my top 5 of the Disney era TV shows. But I do think that in a show that had so much mystery, I feel like it needed to be a little more careful about some of the mysteries that maybe it wasn't trying to set up. And a lot of our listeners might be like, of course, he was just trying to shoot her. I think it kind of goes back to what we were talking about last week, where I think I have to say you were probably right, you and Alex, where you guys felt like he had a lot of anger towards May, and I thought he was being very apologetic. But I think in this, no, you're right. It's that he does still have some anger towards her, in part because she's a reminder of his biggest failure. And his journey was very much not what I expected in this, but it was, I think, really powerful in terms of how it was. We really saw him fall, quite specifically. And Osha kills him pretty much in cold blood. Like we have an awesome, incredible fight scene between him and Chimere that was just so well done. In which, again, he's kind of very much going like, Luke at the end of Return of the Jedi. Like, he's very much like tapping into emotion and anger. And Chimere is kind of like about to let him kill him, but he seems, very confident that Osha's going to save him, which she does.
May saved him.
May saves him. Thank you.
There you go.
And then just there we have it, that Osha comes out and kills him. And it's force choking, which has till now been very dark side coded, although Luke did use it against the Gamorrean guards. So maybe it's not entirely force dark side, and certainly she's giving into her anger, she's giving into her emotions, and she kills him. And I can't, that's, I think, where the brilliance of the show really came out, is I wasn't angry at her. I think it's tragic that she fell like that, but I kind of was rooting for her in a weird way. What was your, not rooting because I knew where she was going, but it was kind of like the, I support women's rights, but I support women's wrongs, she becomes very much the villain you want to root for in that moment. Because
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, you've been along this emotional journey with this character so much that their justified anger feels so justified to you as well, that it's like, I'm not even that mad at you, but it's like, So I get that, because it's like, we've seen this whole show just weave this web of lies around her character, and for it to all come crashing down. Everyone knew a part of the truth except for her. I feel like she was the most in the dark of everyone. At least those who were on Brendock.
Right.
And I mean, the fall makes a ton of sense, especially it sucks. At the start of the episode, she's like, Chimere says, "Oh, you sure you don't want to study? It's your last chance." She said, "No, I'm not my sister." And it's like, and he said that even after she kills Soul. They were like, "Oh, well, we'll just turn him in, we'll just wait for the Jedi to get here," whatever. And Chimere calls her out. He's like, "You still believe in your precious Jedi after all of this? After what just happened, what's wrong with you?" And he's right, is the problem. When it comes to her experience with the Jedi, he's completely right. And I don't know. It's one of those things where it's like, I do like Saul a lot, but it's like, I think we all knew his character had to die by the end of this. Or at least it just felt that way as the show went on and we got to know the character more, and just how lost and disturbed he is, that it's like, it wouldn't make sense for them to be and he's just back on Coruscant and that's the story, that doesn't track with the characters. Sorry, go ahead.
If he had really come to that place of acceptance and sorrow and seeking redemption, then I think there could have been. But once I saw that, what I think you guys saw last episode, and I just didn't want to accept yet, that he really wasn't there, that he was still on we've got to cover this all up, and the kind of I will hurt people in order to save the person I wanted to do. I think it was what needed to be done. And it does lead to one of the absolute most beautiful visual moments we've seen in Star Wars. And I think I understood what was happening, but I know you have done a lot of deep dives into lightsaber lore and stuff like that. So can you please tell us why it is that we get a close-up of the kyber crystal inside the lightsaber and see it change color?
Yeah, so basically, in that moment, Osha is holding Soul's broken saber. As she's choking the life out of her once master, and as of 6 hours before this, role model, absolute just icon within her world. as she's choking the life out of him and she's holding his lightsaber, because she is so force sensitive, she does have a connection to a kyber crystal. It's just the way that it works, you know?
Yep.
And that much like anger and that much hatred, what it does basically is the idea is that the dark side corrupts a kyber crystal. You can't go out and find a red kyber crystal. They don't come that way. They come in all these other colors, you know, blue, yellow, green, purple, cyan, whatever you want to call it. But they don't come naturally red. You need to corrupt and basically like destroy the integrity of the crystal a little bit. And that's actually why in the sequels we see Kylo Ren has a cracked blade, because he had so much unbridled hate and rage that he not only corrupted the crystal but cracked it.
Right.
So this was just like a really, I mean, for like nerds like us, this is like a super exciting, cool thing to see, like actual visual representation of what it is to see a Jedi corrupt a kyber crystal,
Right.
basically, or a dark side user to corrupt a kyber crystal.
And we get to see not only like kyber crystal itself turn red, but then I think much more visually, you know, when she turns on the lightsaber, it starts blue, but then turns red in just this really incredible way. So, yeah, what do you think of her journey?
Osha's?
Mm-hmm.
Osha was all over the place this episode, I feel like.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because I'm just trying to think why she was so pissed at May when she first got there. Because, like, she sees May. I wrote down kind of a bit of their conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'll do some quotes if you don't mind.
No, please do.
So basically, it's between May and Osha, and Osha says about herself and Saul, he tried to teach me to accept that someone I love could be capable of this level of destruction, and I failed. I could never learn to calm my negative emotions, my hatred of you, my grief over our mother, so I never became a Jedi. And I guess in the end that's... Oh, sorry. And I guess in the end you got what you wanted. It's when May says, Saul killed our mother. I saw it with my own eyes. He's lied to you. Every day since you left our home. How could he teach you to control your negative emotions? He's the reason you have them.
Yeah.
You didn't fail. He did.
Yeah.
And then Osha just like fucking banshee screams at her, and they just have some of the most intense like fist to fist. And it's a really cool combat scene also, because it's clearly done to look like they are fighting 100% themselves. It's just the perfectly matched fighting style. That's kind of like Captain America Winter Soldier type of a thing. Isn't that a similar idea of like...
Yeah, although, you know, there, of course, they have two different actors. We're here, it's the same. And I'm sure there's stunt doubles and stuff like that. But I thought, again, in a kind of like a wonderful way where character design can really help what you're doing. The fact that her hair was in such a manner that it covers her face unless you're really looking at her directly on. Like, I kept noticing, I was like, oh, well, probably like, I wonder if they have to like CGI her face onto the stunt double in the shot, but they didn't, because unless they're shooting her from direct on, you can't see her face because the way her hair falls. And I was just like, oh, like not only does her hair look amazing, but that's so like clearly they did that intentionally, and that was so brilliant.
Yeah.
I think I found her story very understandable, and I think a lot of that comes from the work that I've done in counseling, because one of the things I learned both in my studies, but also in like, you know, the work I've done in counseling, but also any person who's had to tell a good friend like hard news, like, you know, your partner's cheating on you or something like that. Like when they are almost convinced, but they're trying so hard to not believe it and to convince themselves that you're wrong, they'll lash out at you. That's often when they're the angriest. Like, and it's not because they're like, you'd think they'd be the angriest when they most don't believe it. No, it's when they are closest to believing it, and they're fighting that. And I think that's where Osha was, that she's starting to really have doubts, and she really doesn't want to. And so putting that all on May and be like, no, May, you started the fire. You did all of this. You wanted me to not be a Jedi. Like, it's kind of where her head would go at that point.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it does. It makes a lot of sense where she ended up, and I think it's a really nice place. Well, not nice necessarily, but like a good place for her character to end up at the end of this season, possibly at the end of this show. We don't know yet. And honestly, I'd be happy either way. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see if we do get like a second season. I would want to know a lot more about like Vern and May, and like maybe some snippets of the dark side users. But like you said, it's like I don't really want a deep dive into them because it takes away some of the mystere.
Yeah.
But I do it leaves me wondering about that light whip and his scars on his back. I'm like, I just want to know. And like you said, maybe it's a comic book. Maybe it's a book or something that continues this story. But I am endlessly curious about a few of these lingering questions.
I mean, I think we definitely did learn that Chimer was Venestra's Padawan.
Correct.
So I think that's that. Yeah, but like so much is left unknown. And I think I'm with you. I'm okay with that. Like, I'm seeing a lot of people online already trying to be like, okay, no, here's exactly who that guy behind them was, like a skeletal hand, and here's what it all means. I think it's intentional that we don't know. I think it is entirely possible that Chimer is the apprentice to a master, and he is meant to be training kind of like his Darth Maul, with the idea that like he both wants this person to be good, but he also knows that like either he and Osha will take over from Bony Hands, or like Bony Hands will work with Osha to kill him. Like all that's possible. Yeah. I think it's entirely possible that Chimer, Darth Biceps, has no idea that that guy's behind him, and this guy is just watching because he's because I still kind of like the idea that maybe, when he says, "Well, you would call me Sith." Maybe he's just a dark side guy he thinks the Sith have been gone for 900 years, but this guy's been watching the whole time. I mean, there's so many ways it could go, and I like that mystery. I don't feel like we need to, and I think that like any discussion about this which tries to tell me exactly what it is, I'm going to kind of be suspicious of, because I think it's very intentional that we don't know, that's left wide open.
Yeah, I feel like that's a good part of so many shows is like the balance between what should be like, ooh, let's try to figure it out, and what should be like, okay, but this is just the way it's supposed to be, guys. Like, just sit in it, enjoy the conclusion a little bit,
Exactly.
But yeah, I do want to point out about this show in general. I read the choreographers in charge of the Rogue One hallway scene were in charge of all the fight scenes in this show.
That makes a lot of sense.
It makes a lot of sense.
Because I feel like, Alex would be mad at me here, but I feel like I got a better sense of Jedi at the height of their mastery. Because for the most part in the prequel movies of the Clone Wars, either they're fighting drones and like the robots who are so like the droids, which are ridiculously easy, or they're fighting like, top level like Plagueis, and not Plagueis, Palpatine and help me out here. Count Dooku, yes. Darth Tyrannus. And here, like, it was like lots of Jedi doing lots of awesome stuff, and just the fight scene, that last fight scene, Saul seems to be kicking Chimer's ass, and I think it could be that Chimer's kind of letting it happen, but I think it also could be like Chimer's good, but he's not like the greatest of all time. He was very well trained. He was like, when all those other Jedi didn't understand how the cortosis worked, he could get away with all the things he did, killing them all, but he can't pull the same trick twice. So, yeah, I thought there was so much interesting things happening there.
Yeah, I agree. That is something I wrote down, was that Soul kind of like, at the end of the day, kicked his ass. Like, didn't, but like kind of did, just because like how much effort the stranger was putting in, and how much like brute force it was, and how many times there was just the slightest move of the force and we saw Soul kind of float away or do something like super conveniently. Like, I think it's very clear that the stranger may even have better lightsaber combat skills. I don't know. I don't think so, but I'm not an expert.
Yeah.
But I think it's very clear that Soul has much stronger, maybe pull on the force, or like call to the force. Or maybe it's that he has a calmer mind while fighting, because we have seen the stranger use very large bursts of the force as well. But it was just cool to see kind of like even though Soul is not a good example of a Jedi, it was a little bit more of the serene versus just like the constant battery of the stranger's attacking style.
Yeah, I think so. So I don't want to make this go too long, but let's talk about Vernestra and the Jedi, because I think in many ways that's the thing that is most lasting to me about that show, is what I feel like I've learned about the Jedi at this period and how it helps set up the prequels. What did you think of Vernestra's action? Oh, and actually, this is a good time to talk about the senator. So a senator comes in. Did you write down the senator's name?
Rayan Court.
Rayan Court, thank you. I want to call him Senator John Jones because he's played by the same actor who plays the character John Jones in the Arrowverse and was phenomenal at it, mostly in the Supergirl TV show, The Martian Manhunter. And he is basically representing the person who, most of the time in this kind of movie, would be like the annoying government bureaucrat who wants to bring in lots of oversight and not let our heroes like go out and get our hands dirty and do the right thing. Except that now we've realized that like what that's basically all encouraging is like, police abuse or soldier abuse. And like actually government oversight's a good thing because he's specifically pushing for government oversight of the Jedi, or at least like an audit or review of them. And he really wants to he kind of has an understanding of what happened and that like a Jedi may have gone rogue and that there may have been something may have killed a number of Jedi and that might be like some problem. And he wants to review, and he kind of gets to the point of saying, like, I think the Jedi are too powerful. I think like too many people just don't say no to the Jedi, and that's bad. And the whole time, like he was speaking, all I could hear was like all the civilian review boards, that have pushed for more oversight over the police and over the military and stuff like that. And Vernestra is very much we must protect the institution. And I think that's what really drives her lying about it, is she thinks like, this is a much larger point that we're going to do a couple of full episodes on, but I'm a real believer in the idea that institutions themselves are not like fundamentally good or fundamentally bad, but become corrupted when like they start out thinking we have to do good things. But then they become so convinced that they have to do good things and only they can do the good things that any threat to them is taken as a threat to the mission and therefore not okay. And this is the police review boards, like I said, it's Soul, I think, can be seen very much as like, the white savior he's not white, but like the white savior complex of like, we have to go rescue those poor children from those weird and strange cultures that we don't understand. And like, yeah, do I think those people are just being like, wahaha, let's steal children so we can raise them in like white human families or whatever? No. I think that they think they're doing the good thing because they're so blinded by their own racism and their own like desire to help without understanding who the people are trying to help and all the classism and stuff like that. And to me, that's very much what I got out of Vernestra here, is that she's not evil. She hasn't fallen to the dark side necessarily, although there's some of that corruption energy happening. She honestly believes that the galaxy needs the Jedi, and so she has to protect the Jedi from these people who just wouldn't understand.
Yeah. She almost just feels like a cornered guard dog.
Yeah, I think it's a great analogy.
Very much on top of her shit, ready to do her job, but at the same time is just like so on the defense. And so, yeah, like you said, convinced of the Jedi's kind of goodwill. I did write down some quotes from that conversation she had with the senator.
Yeah, please.
I'll just throw a few of them. He said, "You don't like me. You think my campaign for an external review of the Jedi is a personal vendetta." Vern said, "If you want my honest opinion, then yes." He said, "Good. Here's mine. I think the Jedi are a massive system of unchecked power posing as a religion, a delusional cult that claims to control the uncontrollable." Vern says, "We don't control the Force." The senator said, "Not the Force, your emotions. You project an image of goodness and restraint, but it's only a matter of time until one of you snaps. And when, not if that happens, who will be strong enough to stop him?"
Turns out his son. But yeah, like, and I would, the person who snaps, it's the son of the person, you don't know what I mean, but like, yeah, he said that, and I was like, oh my God, that's like all the things that the critics of the Jedi have been saying for so long, without going to like, oh, the Sith are just as good or just as bad or that nonsense. I think the Jedi are still like better than the Sith, but like all the critiques that we have about them, I think that's exactly it. That whole line of like posing as a religion and like pretending you can control your emotions, that hits so hard.
Yeah. a delusional cult pretending they can control the uncontrollable. Ugh. And the fact that she assumes he's talking about the Force, it just shows how like off base the Jedi are, or like how they don't even understand how they're being perceived anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was a really interesting character. I had forgotten he was from like Supergirl and the Arrowverse, but I recognized him and I was like, I like this guy. I don't know why.
Yeah.
So it was really good to see him back.
Mm-hmm.
He's a great actor.
And I'll say, and like, I'm not trying to project these exact terms. I'm saying that like my mental health journey has taught me a framework that I think can be applied in a broader sense. But like when it comes to people who have the kind of symptoms that I have that are kind of like related to PTSD or borderline or CPSD or things like that, like one of the things that I've learned is that one of the things that our brains are really good at is protecting us. And so like, you know, we learn to recognize patterns. We learn to recognize like, if this happens, this other scary thing might happen. And so protect yourself from it. Mm-hmm. The problem is that sometimes our brains are too good at it. And so especially when we've had massive trauma, especially when we're young, or just at any point, it's very easy for our brains to start seeing that paranoia in places that, like, for our paranoia to start making us see that fear in places that maybe it actually isn't. And this is true in everything, I think, from a, you know, person who like is very guarded with, you know, the next person they date after they've gotten really badly hurt. And again, I don't think it's always bad. I think sometimes that level of protection is good. But like, you know, I know that because of my own childhood trauma and stuff like that, I was very, very cautious. And I saw things as very scary and had to kind of learn to like let go of some of that. We know, if we've read the High Republic books, that Vernestra has lived through a period in which the galaxy was almost totally destroyed, in large part because of the failings of, you know, normal people government and the corruption and the personal agendas, and allowing the Nile to take over. And only the Jedi could save them. Presumably, we haven't read the end of those books, but, you know, presumably something like that happens. And so the idea that she could become one of those people who thinks that the Jedi and only the Jedi can save us, and that, you know, government of non-Force users is always to be seen as a threat and to be pushed back and lied to, I think she's wrong, but I think it's completely understandable how she comes to that place.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that. Real quick.
Mm-hmm.
Connect the last two dots. We were talking about Vern and her PTSD.
Oh, yeah. So my point being that I feel like that, so I'll kind of wrap it again. So yeah, just, I mean, too long, didn't read because that was very long and I apologized. I'm just saying, I think that during the events of the High Republic books, Vernestra goes through a situation where the galaxy is almost completely taken over by anarchy and chaos because of the failings of the governments of non-Force users. And it's only the Jedi, presumably, who are able to save them. And so the idea that she would have a kind, like, again, I'm not saying she literally has PTSD. She's a different species. We have no idea how her brain chemistry works. But that she'd have some kind of a similar response of, I have learned that I cannot trust the governments of non-Force users. I can only trust the Jedi. And so this senator is a threat. And I have to extinguish this threat by coming up with this lie. It makes sense to me. I don't think she's right, but I think it's understandable.
Yes. Yeah, I totally understand what you're saying. That's so true, because she's just, there's no thought or listening to the critiques that he has to say. He keeps asking her questions and she says, we're very close to a suspect. Thank you for checking in, or something like that. And she repeats it multiple times. And he's like, okay, I get it. Fine.
She like gestures to the door and even like opens the door once. Yeah.
Force opens the door. He's like, well, I'm reporting you to HR. And then he leaves.
All right. This has been a great discussion. There's going to be a lot more we're going to have, but any kind of last quotes or comments you wanted to talk about? I know you've got a couple on your list.
I actually just got the one thing. We got Yoda, bitches.
We did get Yoda at the very
end.
We
got Yoda in the house.
Vernestra like walks into a chamber and says, you know, Master, I need to tell you about something. And then we just see like the pullback shot and we see the little green ears.
Yeah. That's the thing where it's like the show ended because we had two like closing shots from this show. And the first
Mhm.
one is this really powerful shot of Chimere and Osha doing this very interesting thing where they're like holding the lightsaber together. Like she's holding the lightsaber and then he puts his hand around her hand and the lightsaber. And I'm like, this is interesting, but it's like, it gave them a very interesting, like unified appearance as like master and apprentice or apprentice and acolyte. It was just kind of this really sick wide shot and then, goes to dark. And I was like, damn, the show's over. And then it fades up and there's Vernestra and I was like, ooh. And then we got Yoda. And that was pretty great. I thought to myself, I was like, Alex has got to be so happy. Like, first of all, we got possible Darth Plagueis. We got something to talk about with the Plague Boys, And then we got Yoda, which is, I remember a couple episodes ago, Alex said something about rioting or flipping tables if there was no Yoda. So
Yeah.
the world can sleep safe tonight. There will be no Alex on the patrols. He's been satisfied, except he hasn't watched it yet, but he will be.
We'll get him. Yeah, so don't text about him quite yet, but we'll get all of his thoughts on this. He'll be on an episode coming up soon. And there again, I'm going to say, just like we don't know what Bony Hands is doing, I think people are going to, like, one of the things people kept trying to do was find a way to use this to say, oh, look, here's how it breaks canon because this Jedi knew this or this Jedi knew that. And I think the Vernestra story, which again, even someone like Kyle Mundi is going to be the one to hear from Vernestra, if she tells Yoda the truth, well, then what does Yoda know? What we don't know what she tells Yoda. She might tell Yoda an abridged version of the truth. It might be that Yoda doesn't believe her. It might be that, like, I want to go back and rewatch the Yoda scenes and wonder, like, does he actually say the Sith had been extinct for 1,000 years? Or does he just kind of, like, nod while Mace Windu and Kyle Mundi say that, and he doesn't actually say anything? Like, I think it is intentionally left vague, and I'm interested in the speculation, but I want to be very careful. I'm already seeing the posts. They're being like, okay, well, that was definitely Darth Plagueis, and this definitely means that Yoda was a lying scumbag. Like, we just don't know. There's so much we don't know.
So much drama, guys. So much drama. They're cameos. Just smile and have a good time.
Exactly. Well, I was hoping to do a bonus section, but the internet's dying a little bit here, so I'm gonna actually say if you and Alex want to record a little bonus section and we'll throw it on at some point tomorrow, go for it. But if not, definitely thank you all so much for listening. To our members, please, we did post a full episode book review just last week. Definitely check that out. Everyone else, please think about becoming a member. $5 a month, $55 a year. You get all sorts of great things, and you get to help us keep the lights on. Erin, thank you so much for doing this. To all of our listeners, thank you all so much. We have spoken.
See you in hell, Jedi.
Stay classy. Hell.
Oh.